Hello, my name is Jonathan Harris from Worldwide Camera Exchange. Pentax 645 AFN. Three versions of the film camera were made. There was the Pentax 645, which is the first version. I've done a review previously on that. There's a link I'll put up there. And then there's the two autofocus versions, the 645N and the 645N2. Of course, there then were subsequent digital versions, the 645D and others. But what I'm going to talk about now predominantly is the Pentax 645N. Okay, so 645N. I'm going to quickly walk through the features on the N version. As I mentioned, there is an N2. The N2 has mirror lockup. So if you're doing a lot of work with a tripod, the N2 might be your better bet. That said, this camera isn't a camera designed to be used on a tripod. This camera's reason for being is really handheld. Big chunky grip there with a built-in winder, built-in 90-degree prism that you can't change. This camera is designed to be used like this. It's designed to be used handheld in landscape and in portrait mode. It handles really nicely. That's what it's all about. If you do want to use it on a tripod, obviously you can. There's a tripod connection there and there on both sides, so it can be used in vertically or horizontally, which is fantastic. Starting at the back, it's got a fixed back. It takes inserts. You can buy the inserts separately and you can preload these. So if you're finishing a film, you can take an insert out, put it in some little plastic box that you get with the insert, get your new insert which is preloaded with film, take it out of the plastic box and then stick your preloaded insert straight into the camera. So film loading is quite quick if you've got the additional inserts, which is a really nice feature. Just there you have a film holder, so you can put the end of the carton of film to remind yourself what you've got in the film, in the camera obviously. Just there and there, some strap studs. They are specifically for Pentax, so if you're using a different strap, you'll need to get it adapted with the correct fittings for the Pentax studs. Looking at the top, it is a fully automatic camera if you want to use it as a fully automatic camera. So it's autofocus. You can use it in program mode, in shutter priority or in aperture priority. It's quite advanced for a medium format camera. Here you've got the shutter speed dial with the A position if you want to use it in shutter priority. On this side, you've got your exposure compensation. Down here, you have exposure compensation ASA setting. Around the shutter speed dial here, you have your metering setting. To the left and right here, you have auxiliary AF setting positions. The eyepiece does have diopter correction, which is useful. You just turn the collar there to set the diopter in the viewfinder. Again, a nice feature to have that a lot of medium format cameras generally don't have. Metering, I mentioned, I should have said, you've got spot metering, you've got average, you've got center weighted. So again, quite advanced metering for a medium format camera. Main on off switches here. As I mentioned, those two little up and down arrows there can be used to set shutter speeds, also ASA rather, and change various modes on the camera. The lock also has a self-timer position incorporated. Just looking on the side here, you have obviously the grip that I mentioned with the batteries for the motor drive. Batteries just load through the base. AA batteries, what you need, 6 of them, quite straightforward. The depth of field lever, that clearly is to stop down the aperture. So if I stick that on 22, you'll see I'll push that down. You'll see that the aperture shuts down. Looking at the front lenses, it's the standard 645 mount. So if you're buying, it's the same mount if you're buying the oldest 645 lenses or the latest digital 645 cameras, they all take the same mount. Obviously this takes an autofocus lens. If you're using the autofocus lenses, they can be used on the manual focus cameras, the older camera, but you won't get autofocus. Similarly, if you want to use the old manual focus lenses, on this camera you can, not an issue at all, but obviously you won't get autofocus. So if you want autofocus, And if you're buying this camera, I would assume you're buying this camera because it's autofocus. If not, I'd probably stick to the older 645 version. That is quite a bit cheaper. So working on the assumption that you want autofocus, get the autofocus lenses. They're newer. Optically, I don't think you'll see any difference between the later autofocus and the earlier manual focus, but they are a bit newer, so they're likely to be a bit more reliable. Obviously, these can be used in manual focus if you want to. There's just an AF, MF switch just there. To change the lens, black button there, I don't know if you can see that. Just push that in, lens comes off, very straightforward. There's the mirror, it's obviously an SLR camera, as I mentioned, with the built-in 90-degree prism. Let me just stick that back on. Looking at the opposite side, as I mentioned, tripod bush. So the camera can be mounted on the tripod in the vertical position, which is a really nice feature because these are big and heavy. All medium format cameras are big and heavy, and when you start trying to mount them on a tripod and tipping them like this, it takes the whole tripod. It takes all the weight, it works off the central gravity of the tripod, so the whole tripod becomes unsteady. So being able to keep the center of gravity in line with the center of the tripod is a useful thing to be able to do. So that's got that there. Just a little button there. That is the multiple exposure switch. So you just switch that up and you can stick it onto multiple exposure if you want to. Obviously just above there is the sync socket for flash. Just looking on the bottom, very straightforward. That's just the key for the to get into the battery compartment that I mentioned earlier, and you've got the second 1/4 inch tripod bush for the tripod mounting there. Fundamentally, that's it. Very nice cameras, very reliable cameras. If you're buying these secondhand, don't forget spares can be a problem for them. So do check them very carefully. If you can get a return option, put a film through it, check it thoroughly. I've got a lot of videos on checking secondhand lenses and checking shutters and checking cameras generally. Check those out. But yeah, buy with this return option if you can. Always stick to the better equipment. These were professionally used, and yes, they're designed to be professionally used, but you don't want to buy one that's battered. I mean, I have a look at this one. This one is actually in very, very nice condition. You'll see the condition is actually fantastic. That's the sort of stuff you want ideally, because you know a camera like this has been used very little, so it's likely to have a lot more mileage left in it still. If you buy something that's been professionally used, it's been heavily used, it's been abused, it might serve you brilliantly for decades to come, but the probability of having an issue is higher. I hope that's useful. If you've got any comments, please just stick them in the boxes below. I'll always respond when I can. Otherwise, please subscribe and like, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.